All right, when you guys start your painting and you finish doing that transfer onto the background, you want to think of the largest area first and consider what that background is going to look like. So think about what technique you want to use. You could do any of the ones that we covered in class. We talked about that wet on wet technique. I kind of like that idea for just getting like a sky in the background. It might be kind of fun to do something like that. So just a recap on that. If you do that technique, I like to use these big mop brushes, which really take up they soak in a lot of water, and wherever you have the water, that paint's gonna flow. So I'm just gonna start with that and see where it goes from there. There's so many great shades of blue you can choose from, and I have a lot of different colors in my palette. That's because I use paints that are out of the tube, and if you want a certain color and it isn't on your set, just let me know and I can help you out with that. So I'm just going to kind of go in with my background, and you can see the brush is really big. It's called a mop brush. It soaks in a lot of water, so when I squeeze it off, it just drips out, and then I can spread that around. I'm gonna let that set for a minute because I need to get a paper towel or something. I want to soak that up. I don't want it to just sit there on the surface like that. And it also adds like a nice texture to the background. So this is a lifting up technique, and it also still has that residual color, which is nice too. And I can continue to work with that. I can go right over that. You can see I'm just dabbing it off, just like that. Nothing special. It's just that I have a really nice big fluffy brush that takes in a lot of water. And I've also wet the paper first. So I'm just kind of, and I'm going to layer it a little bit and maybe add some other colors. But that shows you just how you can get started on a background and get some effects going on that too. I might throw some salt in that background. I think that would look nice, and it's kind of fun to see that effect. So even if I'm getting into my painting and there's paint, that's fine. I'm gonna go over it, and I'm being really neat about it, so it's not gonna cause me issues. And I can lift and pull it off, just like that. And it makes a nice effect. All right, so since I want to make just a little short, quick video for you to just show you how to do this stuff, I've just got the focal point is the sunflower, so imagine that the background, you know, I've worked and completed that, but I do want to show you how to do a few other things with your brushes. And I also have different brushes, so if you need a brush that's thicker or smaller, please ask for something specific. Now, you notice too, if your brush is frayed out, when you dip it into the water, it should suction back together, just like that, to a point. And that will allow you to make finer lines. So let's see, I'm gonna start with, so you can see, I've got a variety of yellows and oranges to begin. So I'm gonna go with my lightest colors first. And if your watercolor paint is dry in your palette, remember it's activated again just by water. So add water to it. Just like that. So you can get it going again. And sometimes it crumbles up if it's some of the paints that I've used from the tubes of watercolor. So this is just a little bit. I'm just going to go light and work into dark. You always want to do that, especially with this type of material. Work light to dark. And you can see, even though that's a nice light yellow, it's chromatically light. On this paper, it's really quite bright and intense. Now, if I want to pull some more of that paint off and layer it, I can do that too, or lighten it. So you can see how that works. Just dab it off and you can reapply it again if it doesn't work for you that way. Or add a little bit of variation to it. And remember, with your flower painting, it's not, you can make it the way you want. You can change things. Just follow some of the basic rules that we've talked about when it comes to using watercolor. Use the technique, dab things up, create textures. That's always fun. Don't be afraid of color. You can add other colors, but be mindful. It can turn to mud if you get too many contrasting colors. That means colors opposite that don't mix. That would be like orange and blue, orange and green. Those are going to make browns. And you've already got plenty of different shades of browns, which I will do for the center here. So I should just use those. I don't need to mix those colors. And I certainly don't want my paintings to look muddy either. So be mindful of paints that you're layering, because it's transparent. Those layers show through, right? You can have those effects. Okay, and I like to blend my yellows, so I'm gonna have a couple different ones, and I'm gonna have some oranges in there too. So that's gonna be fun. And if it gets to be too bright, remember you can just dab it right off with the napkin. So that's a nice orange, and mixed in with that yellow, it looks really good. And I can add some of that up here because that's some of where the darker areas are. And when you have shadowy areas, maybe not on this particular painting, but let's say you have a violet, you're doing something that's predominantly purple, you can add blues to darken up that hue. So that's the technique, using other colors within that same color family to create shadowy areas, or even some of the browns added in to like a blues or the violets, that will create a nice shadowy area too. So you can get a lot out of just using a paper towel to dab things off, pull back some color, going back in, maybe adding some areas that are a little less transparent, you know, layer it up a bit in some areas, let it just be nice and transparent in others. And remember, water is what activates and moves the paint. Just like that. Okay, so that's super fun to do. And I'm gonna add a little more orange that's a little higher chroma. That means it's gonna pop more forward. See how bright that orange is? So it gives it a nice variation. Okay, so you know, just keep trying different things, pull it off if it's not what you want. It's as simple as that. And remember to add water to make the paint flow. Okay. And I'm going to start light again, light first, and go to the brown for the center. But I do want to have that nice orangey glow underneath, yellow-orange glow. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to cover that. And I don't want to paint wet on wet necessarily, because if I do that, then it's just going to continue to soak my paper and get it more and more saturated, which is not necessary. I can wait a minute to let things settle in. I can also, dab that dry, and then go in with the browns. Just like that. Hey, come on in. I'm just making a little video for my students to see for watercolor. So fun. Oh, I'm talking to myself, don't mind me. And then just kind of continue to layer that and add, go in with light to dark. And there are several shades of brown that you can use to make your flowers look more natural, right? So don't just stick with what you've got on your tray. I've got other trays of watercolor paint in the classroom that have more varieties of yellows, more medium yellows, and some darker shades of brown, and some lighter shades like this orangey brown color. That's a sienna. So I have some of that on a palette too, so you can use those different colors to get effects. You just gotta kind of look at your painting, your reference, and see what colors you need to add, and go from there, and you can get a lot out of that. So again, I do like to kind of pull out the paint too as I work, because I can always go back in and darken it, but I do like to see those effects. And I will tap back into that surface later with my very dark darks and probably show more of those dots on that surface. So that gives you kind of an idea of just how to get started. And you can see where it's pooling here. It's gonna be darker if I just let it sit there. I just love to move paint, so I'm just gonna mess around with it a little bit. You can do that too. You can get it to shift space. You can see it adds a little variation, and it's real subtle. Doesn't take much. And greens. So in the sunflower, and in your pictures too, you have many different types of flowers there. Read these little side notes. They're really good, and they'll give you some ideas. Even if you look through, you can see the color palette that they use to paint with, and you can kind of visually match it up with the colors you have on your palette, and then some of the others that I have in the classroom. And you can look through the sequence from start to finish if you want to glance through that, read it. Another thing I like to do is take note of some of those little side explanations. So it says here, the texture is created a number of ways for the center piece, masking or lifting off, and painted lines and dots. So that's what we were just doing, the lifting off. The masking technique we talked about a little bit in class, that using the resist or the glue. You can use like a wax resist, or you can use the different glue, rubber cement. But you have to do that before you even start painting. So I don't have any. I'm just going to use the lifting off technique, and that really works nice. Now you can see how it's dry now. Now I can add darker flecks onto the center without it completely bleeding out, which is not what I want. I want these little pebbles to stand up. And then I might go back in and detail them with a a pen at the very end. So I've still got work to do, still got a lot of work to do, and layering and everything. So I'm just gonna kind of go from there. And then down on the leaves, it says scratching out creates a broken white line that separates this leaf from the one behind, still giving a soft impression. And the difference in the edge quality of these veins, varying from hard to soft, helps to marry them to the leaf. Okay, so you can see that contrast really does help between the dark green to the lighter, more translucent areas. And the white edge is nice, but I would suggest maybe using a, I would do an oil pastel, you know, or a white crayon even, if you can really get a nice, fine, small line, but you'd have to really control that mark. I'm just gonna do a little bit of separation and show the white of the paper through, and then maybe I'll use a pastel later and use a little resist method. So just to remind you, go from light to dark. That is the best way to do that. So I'm gonna just start with like a more vibrant green, even more vibrant than the green that I have on the leaves, which is totally okay. You can do that as well. I love this bright green. That's, you know, sort of the artistic choice that I'm gonna make here. But I'm paying attention to where the light is coming. The light is coming from this direction. You can see on the flower that's already painted that the brighter area, that is the sun coming this way. So I'm gonna keep that in mind as I paint these leaves, and maybe make my lighter areas this way, hitting the leaves in that direction. And I can also use this light green to sprinkle in other areas too. So paint around, don't get stuck in one spot. There's the stem here. And so you can see the lightest green is really a more natural color of green. So if I want to tone this down, I can simply mix in maybe a light or a golden yellow. Can mix that color in there and see how it looks. I've got a sienna that's the more orangey color, and I've got browns. Those can all deepen that hue and give it some more an olive green tone. I could even go in there with a blue and mix it in with that, but I don't want to do that too fast. I want to try mixing some of those more natural yellows and layer it a little bit more before I go that direction. Some of you might think, oh, okay, maybe I should just use a touch of black. Well, be really careful, because black will dominate a painting in no time and turn everything in a direction that you may not want it to go. So just be very aware of that. Another tip for you when you're painting, and let's say like this palette, it's completely covered. I'm just gonna try to use a little open spot. I can mix my bright green just a little bit from my brush. I want to be real mindful that I am the only one using this palette, so I'll clean that yellow off that green. So I got a little open space. Now I can just mix that olive green. You can see that made a big difference. Now it's a little more natural looking, and it's simply just mixing in a color, two different colors to get that effect. But I like laying down that bright color first. It does help when I go in and mix colors. It has some base to work off of. And you just keep going from there and building color. And remember, don't oversaturate your paper or you'll get really frustrated very fast. So kind of keep your eye out for that, and you can lift as you need to create some nice texture. You can mix paint, try out and see what it looks like. And if you go outside the lines, that's fine. You can always fix that too. Just control your work, your brush work a little more. Okay, be a little more steady with it. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of clean off that green, and I got a little spot here. I'm going to add some of that green, and I'm going to mix that olive green again. Simple, I'm just going to pull some of this yellow ochre, it's that golden yellow, mix it in with that really vibrant green, and voila. When you get that in there, it will turn it a different shade. So all those little flecks of watercolor, those will reactivate if I hit it with water. So remember, that's what's nice about watercolor. You can really, you can conserve it really well and not worrying about it drying out on you. But you just have to be careful, okay? So yeah, keep on working, build it up, pull stuff off, try different colors. It's always good to keep a piece of paper close by to test colors out. And I always keep like a piece of wax paper nearby or something to use as an extra palette, or even like a lid or a container lid, something like that is very helpful. So I'm going to try a different color green, see what that looks like mixed in. That looks pretty good too. Let's see, close to my reference. More I'm experimenting with color, the better it's starting to look as I'm moving through the painting here. And look at the value. Value means the lightness, right? So lights and darks, that's the value. Color has value. All right, so that is it. Remember, ask me questions, refer to all your resources, so you can have a good day painting.